Welcome to Cinematic Excrement. Today I get to tackle another faith-based movie. Because those always turn out well. And 2014 gave me no shortage of movies to choose from in that category.
And I'm not just talking cheap direct-to-DVD movies like the crap the Asylum puts out under their Faith Films label. These movies were actually released to theaters. Some releases were limited, only playing on a few hundred screens, but the fact that so many of them were released theatrically at all is remarkable. Son of God, The Identical, God's Not Dead, Persecuted, Heaven is for Real, Saving Christmas, and the subject of today's review, Left Behind. The movie is based on a popular series of books written by Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins, presenting a fictionalized account of the Christian rapture as seen through the eyes of a small group of people. If you aren't already aware, the rapture, or at least Left Behind's interpretation of the rapture, is an event that takes place during the second coming of Christ when the faithful are taken up by Jesus into heaven and everyone else is left behind, hence the title.
Critical reception was mixed from Christians and non-Christians alike, but the book sold well enough to spawn 15 more books in the series. Yes, 15, really, as well as several movie adaptations.
Yes, I said several movies. The 2014 movie isn't just an adaptation, it's a reboot. Left Behind was originally made into a direct-to-video movie way back in 2000, starring everyone's favorite evangelical dickhead, Kirk Cameron. It was also given a limited theatrical release after it was released on video. Don't ask me to explain that one. I won't be giving it a full review today, but here's the TLDR version.
It stinks.
Surprise, surprise, the movie sucked. The story was stupid, the acting was terrible, and the special effects were shit. But thanks to its extremely low budget, it managed to turn a profit despite making less money than Jupiter Ascending. This led to 2 direct-to-video sequels, which also sucked. Unlike the book, critical reaction to the movie was not mixed. It was overwhelmingly negative. Even the authors of the book hated it. Tim LaHaye hated it so much he actually sued the production company. Not because they screwed up the story, mind you, but because he was under the impression it would be a big-budget release and not the bargain basement video they ended up making. I suppose I can understand how he'd feel misled, considering the people who made Left Behind the movie called it the biggest and most ambitious Christian film ever made. And yes, that's a direct quote. I can only assume these people have somehow never heard of Ben-Hur. Or they're just full of shit. You make the call.
They eventually reached a settlement, and one of the conditions for that settlement allowed LaHaye to remake the Left Behind movie series, and that remake hit the big screen late last year. Unlike the original movie, both authors were reportedly very happy with how this one turned out. So this time they got no excuse.
What really blows my mind is the cast they put together for this movie. As far as recognizable names, the original Left Behind had Kirk Cameron and, well, that's about it. But the reboot somehow got Nicolas fucking Cage.
And that could have been awesome if we got the batshit crazy, not the bees Nick Cage. But for Left Behind, he's pretty much phoning it in. My disappointment knows no bounds.
And Cage isn't the only recognizable name that got conned into starring in this travesty. They also got Leah Thompson and Chad Michael Murray.
Agent Thompson, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. I hope Peggy kicks you in the face.
Cage plays an airline pilot named Rayford Steele, which is a far more badass name than this character deserves, so I'm not going to call him that. I'm going to call him Jimmy. Jimmy's daughter Chloe, played by Cassie Thompson, no relation to Leah, has come home from college for her father's surprise birthday party. But the real surprise is he's suddenly been called in by the airline to fly a plane to London, so the party has been canceled. But the even realer surprise is the flight to London is just an excuse for Ray to get away from his wife and spend time with his mistress, Hattie, played by Nikki Whalen.
Well, I say mistress, but really it's more of an attempted mistress. They freely admit they haven't actually done anything together, but they plan to do all sorts of stuff in the future. Someday. Honest. In fact, when they get to London, they're going to a U2 concert together. Scandalous!
This is one of the most sterile depictions of adultery I have ever seen. There's even a scene where they tease the two of them kissing, only to stop just short. It's like they're imitating a Nicholas Sparks movie poster. Now, they did this in the original movie as well, but that was because the woman who played Jimmy's mistress was Kirk Cameron's wife, and they couldn't show them kissing on camera because she and her husband refused to kiss anyone but each other, even if it's just acting.
I swear I am not making that up.
But this movie doesn't have that problem as far as I'm aware, so I'm not sure what the deal is. Anyway, Chloe just happens to bump into Captain Jimmy at the airport, and they have time to talk before he leaves. And it is hilarious how inept he is at keeping his attempted extramarital affair a secret. Chloe sees him coming up the escalator chatting it up with Hattie, but when she asks him about Hattie, he tries and fails to play dumb.
Who's that girl?
What girl?
That flight attendant? The beautiful blonde one?
Flight attendant.
What's a flight attendant?
She also meets Chad Michael Murray's character, news reporter Cameron Williams.
Talk to my friends.
My friends think I'm a porn star for some reason.
Chloe comes to his rescue when he's accosted in the airport by some crazy lady spouting some nonsense about how earthquakes and tsunamis and whatnot are signs that the end of the world is nigh and we must repent, etc., etc.
This is something I've never understood about end times preachers. Haven't natural disasters been happening since, forever? Why is it suddenly now about the end of the world?
So God knew that all these things were going to happen.
Honey, God knows everything.
So then why doesn't he do something?
Ah, yes, the age-old question. How can a loving God allow all of these bad things to happen? Of course, there are intelligent ways to debate this question. It's a shame this movie doesn't show any interest in doing so.
Pretty much the only answer it offers is argle fargle blargle mysterious ways, the religious equivalent of shit happens. The original Left Behind had the same problem, as do quite a few religious movies. Call me crazy, but I would think a movie that assumes God exists and he loves us would want to make him look like less of a jerk. Of course, Chloe's argument isn't any better. She's just taking the extreme opposite stance. Earthquakes mean God exists. No, they mean he doesn't. He does. He doesn't. He does. He doesn't.
Rabbit season. Duck season. Rabbit season. Rabbit season. Duck season. Fire!
The only thing this argument accomplishes is wasting my time. And boy, does this movie love to waste my time. This exact same argument pops up again and again and again, each time more pointless than the last.
The rest of Chloe's family consists of her little brother Raimi and her mother, played by Leah Thompson. Mom recently became a born-again Christian, which created a bit of a rift in the family as Mom spends a lot of time proselytizing to the others. And while Raimi doesn't seem bothered by it, Jimmy is at least contemplating an affair, and Chloe is getting annoyed by the whole thing herself.
I don't mean to push. I know it must feel that way. I just want you to be ready.
Ready for what?
Wait a minute. Are we implying that the mother knows when the rapture will happen? Because that's pretty ridiculous considering the Bible is quite clear that only God can possibly know when the end times will happen. A fact that even the movie acknowledges at the start of the closing credits. Then again, that hasn't stopped people from trying to predict the date of the rapture in the past, and most of those people have freely acknowledged that the Bible clearly says they can't possibly know the date. But they know anyway because shut up.
Chloe decides she's heard enough preaching for one day and takes her little brother to the mall where they enjoy a breakdancing performance? Well, this came out of nowhere. And I love how everyone is clearly clapping out of time with the music.
And they're doing a terrible job of feigning their excitement. Either that or their volume just kicked in.
Meanwhile, we're introduced to the first-class passengers on Jimmy's flight, because everyone in coach is poor and therefore doesn't matter. There's a senile elderly couple, Muslim dude, Area 51 conspiracy theorist, Tex Richmond, Biggie Smalls, heroin addict, the girl from American Idol, the little person from Pirates of the Caribbean, some kid who can't act, and a few random people we'll never see again. And Buck is there too, because of course he is. Suddenly, there's a bright flash of light and several people instantly disappear, leaving behind the clothes they were wearing at the time.
Well, the Old Testament does say something about God not liking clothing made of multiple materials, so maybe they were all wearing some kind of polyester mix and God said, "Nuh-uh, that does not fit our dress code. If you're coming in naked."
And don't ask me why all of these clothes are falling from the ceiling, unless people on the upper level of the mall are just randomly throwing them over the edge, or a bunch of people were hanging from the rafters for some reason. This doesn't make sense. Even more ridiculous is the news reporting on the massive worldwide disappearances less than 3 minutes after it happens. 3 minutes! Ain't no way they'd know about this in 3 minutes. They'd know if any of their own employees disappeared in that time, but that's it. Anyway, Chloe's brother is among the vanished, and as she finds out later, so is her mother. So she frantically tries to find little Raimi by running around aimlessly. That's seriously her plan. At one point, she even calls home to see if he went there, which is kinda stupid.
I know this must be a traumatic experience, but he was in your arms when he literally vanished into thin air. Do you think he somehow instantaneously leapt out of his clothing and ran home?
And she nearly gets run over by a car, which has a dead passenger and no driver because the driver got raptured while on the road. And in the parking lot, she nearly gets hit by a CGI airplane for the same reason.
What is with this movie's portrayal of God? He just snatched away 1 million people without warning, and in the process caused several accidents, which I'm sure resulted in the senseless deaths of many innocent bystanders, and the people who survived are no doubt severely traumatized by the sudden loss of their loved ones, and will probably carry the emotional scars of this event for quite some time.
But he loves you.
I'm guessing this is why most Christians don't actually believe in the rapture. Or at least not the version presented in this movie. And the ones who do kinda scare me.
Naturally, the situation on Captain Jimmy's flight isn't much better. No one's actually dying, but people are quite confused and demanding answers from the captain. I'm not sure what they think he can tell them, especially since his co-pilot was among the raptured, along with the girl who can't act, the senile old man, Biggie Smalls, and a few other nameless people. And several people in coach, but again, they're poor, so who gives a shit? For reasons I can't begin to comprehend, the senile old lady was not raptured, even though her husband was. What horrible crime against humanity could she possibly have committed? Especially in her fragile state of mind. The movie makes it quite clear that all children under a certain age have been raptured, I assume because even though they can't fully understand the concept of belief in God, he considers them to be innocent. Fair enough, but why would that not apply to the old lady with dementia?
While she's biologically an adult, her mind isn't functioning well enough to understand much of anything. So, shouldn't God also consider her innocent? If not, then he's not following his own rules for no discernible reason, which makes him look like an asshole. The alternative is the innocence rule is based on some arbitrary age limit, whatever the hell that might be, and that's even dumber. As human beings, we have to set age limits on things like alcohol consumption and sexual consent because it is logistically impossible to assess physical and emotional maturity in every human being on the planet. But an omnipotent and omniscient God should not have this problem. So his only excuse for using this rule is general laziness. Which again makes him look like an asshole.
Also, the Muslim guy wasn't raptured either, even though he certainly appears to be a good man, and Muslims pray to the exact same God as the Christians and even consider Jesus to be a prophet. But apparently, that's not good enough.
You know, I'm starting to think the people who made this movie might just be a teensy bit bigoted. Call it a hunch.
Getting back to the story, Jimmy forces everyone to get back to their seats and calm the fuck down by dropping the air pressure and releasing the oxygen masks. Isn't dropping the air pressure an unnecessary risk? The sight of the masks alone should be enough to get people to run back to their seats. Jimmy tries to contact air traffic control, but gets nothing but static. And his sat phone isn't working either. Because reasons.
Why the hell would the rapture knock out all communications? Did the satellites get raptured too? I'm pretty sure satellites don't believe in Jesus. Dirty heathens.
And now we come to the biggest problem with this movie. I mean, aside from the hints of bigotry. And contradicting its own message by making the supposedly loving God look like a prick. So the third biggest problem with this movie. We're half an hour in. The rapture just happened. Millions of people around the world have mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Captain Jimmy just made the call to turn the plane around and head back to New York, and Chloe is still wandering around aimlessly looking for her little brother.
So, now what? Seriously, what else is there left to say about these people? I mean, there's no big mystery here. The target audience already knows what happened to these people, and with all the heavy-handed religious overtones, even those outside the target audience have likely figured it out as well. We know Chloe is not going to find Raimi or her mother, and we know no one else looking for their missing loved ones will find them either. They're gone. So, what the hell is this movie supposed to do for the next hour and change?
In the original Left Behind movie, there is more to the story. Mostly it depicts the Antichrist's rise to power. It's not as exciting as it sounds, I assure you. And from what I've read online, the events of the book are largely the same. But in the remake, the Antichrist never even shows up.
All we get is a plane flying to New York and a woman running around like a crazy person. For over an hour. Nothing of import happens, nothing is accomplished. So really, this barely qualifies as a Rapture movie. It's actually an airplane movie that just has the Rapture as a plot point. So what became of the rest of the story? Well, apparently they're saving it for a potential sequel. You know, it's becoming a trend in Hollywood nowadays to split the last chapter of a series into 2 films. Left Behind is doing it with the first. That's just stupid.
In order to stretch this incredibly meager story to nearly 2 hours, the filmmakers threw in a lot of pointless filler in an attempt to add drama.
The key word here is attempt.
During the flight back to New York, Jimmy spots another plane on a collision course and attempts to communicate with said plane, but no one responds. Now, any pilot worth his salt would immediately move the fuck out of the way. But as we established with his terrible attempts to hide his affair with the flight attendant, Jimmy is an idiot. So he continues to hold course until the last possible second and then pulls up. And the other plane, which is of course pilotless, scrapes the wing and damages the starboard engine.
And it goes down, no doubt killing any remaining passengers on board. I'm pretty sure God has a higher body count than Rambo at this point.
Can you go to the buried back and check if you can see if there's any liquid spraying out from the wing?
Liquid? You mean fuel?
No, actually, I mean pink lemonade. Yes, fuel!
And of course there's a fuel leak, which means they can't fly far enough to make it to an open runway. And with the damage to the wing, attempting a water landing is also out of the question.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to assume the emergency landing position. Please place your head between your knees and kiss your ass goodbye.
Meanwhile, on the ground, Chloe's story also gets a significant amount of filler. In the form of jump scares. That's how low they've sunk. That's how desperate they are to hold on to the audience's attention with this paper-thin plot. They've resorted to fucking jump scares.
You know how Christianity has the 7 deadly sins? Well, in the world of cinema, there is only one deadly sin. Boredom. And this movie is so going to hell. Yes, I said it.
Anyway, I guess the entire point of all this is for the people left behind to find Jesus or something, and the people on board the plane eventually figure it out thanks to some rather circumstantial evidence. Hey, the co-pilot's watch says John 3:16 on it. Jesus did it! And Chloe learns the truth when visiting her church and discovering, much to her surprise, the associate pastor is still there. Apparently, he said the words every Sunday, but didn't actually believe them.
Which raises the question, why did he choose this as a career path? It doesn't exactly pay well. I mean, unless you're one of those smooth-talking megachurch pastors that swindles their entire congregation out of their life savings. I'm gonna get a lot of hate mail for this episode, aren't I?
The God my mother talked about would never do something like this.
Ding, 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 we have a winner!
At this point, Chloe decides she's had enough of this bullshit and climbs to the top of some random bridge to end it all. Driving people to suicide, praise Jeebus! Oh, for the love of... Would you look at that green screen effect? You can see the cloud through her head. That's terrible. And yes, I say this knowing my own green screen work is no better, but I don't have a studio and a multi-million-dollar budget to work with. I did this at home with cheap amateur equipment that I purchased through a combination of Amazon and Home Depot. One would think a professionally made film scheduled for a theatrical release could do better. For crying out loud, Sharknado had better green screen effects, with about 1/10 of the budget. Anyway, she says one final apology to her mother, and it looks like she's gonna have to jump. Oh, of course. Of course her dad's phone suddenly starts working again. Of course he calls her just before she jumps.
How convenient.
Anyway, Jimmy tells his daughter they're almost out of fuel and the airports are closed, and Chloe gets a brilliant idea. She hijacks a vehicle and races to an empty section of highway that's currently under construction and could serve as a runway. Long story short, she clears the barricades, signals them with a gasoline explosion, and the crappy CGI plane hits the ground hard, but everyone makes it out alive.
I just want to tell you both good luck. We're all counting on you.
Looks like the end of the world.
No.
Go ahead. Say it.
I'm afraid this is just the beginning.
Well, the movie didn't make that much money, so that's not necessarily true. Fingers crossed.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Left Behind. And it should have been. The story was aimless, the effects were craptacular, the logic was non-existent, it was too goddamn long, and overall it was just plain soulless. Ironic for a religious movie. Its Razzie nomination for Worst Picture is well-deserved, as is the nomination for Worst Screenplay. As for Nicolas Cage getting a Worst Actor nod, well, I don't know about that one, honestly. Yeah, he was kinda going through the motions with this movie, like most of the cast, but can you blame him? Look at what he had to work with. He may not have given this movie the performance it needed, but he gave it the performance it deserved.
And before I sign off, there's one more question that must be addressed. Was the remake better than the original? Well, yes and no.
In terms of acting, slightly better. In terms of production quality, also slightly better, and I'm sure that's mainly due to the larger budget. In terms of not having Kirk Cameron, much better. In terms of story, I don't know. The story for the original Left Behind was stupid, but at least in that movie, stuff actually happened. In the remake, there wasn't really much going on, and the few things that did happen felt incredibly forced for the sake of adding drama. Honestly, choosing the superior film here feels like choosing between cancer and Ebola. They're bad in different ways, but they're both still bad. I think the best option here is to destroy both of them and let God sort the dead.
Now that we're done with that mess of a movie, I'm sure many of you would like to know what I think about the movie that beat Left Behind for the prestigious Worst Picture Award, Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to see it in theaters, and the DVD is not out yet, so I'm afraid we're gonna have to save that for another time. However, there is a Worst Picture nominee that I have not yet covered on the show. Till next time, I am the Smeghead, and Hollywood has some repenting to do.
Want to know what I think?
No.